Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling a seriously fascinating concept that's neatly packed into a super dense, four-sentence philosophical puzzle. We're going to decode a core question about the very nature of our reality, pulling directly from a text called Probabilistic Stability in the Multiverse. Now, our source material is brief, for sure, but the logic inside it's incredibly expansive. By the end of this, you're going to see exactly why our universe, despite the sheer infinity of possibilities out there, seems so predictably, well, normal. So let's start with the big paradox here. If anything is literally possible in a multiverse, why is our universe so uniquely predictable? I mean, think about it for a second. Why doesn't gravity just decide to shut off randomly on a Tuesday afternoon? Or why do flipped coins reliably land heads roughly 50% of the time, instead of, spontaneously turning into a completely different object midair? It's a staggering question, but our source text offers a tight, logical answer to this exact mystery. Right now, we're going to break down that answer step by step. We're taking that dense philosophical logic and basically unpacking the geometry of reality itself. All right, Section 1, the ground reality, the reliability of probability. Before we get out into the wild, far reaches of parallel dimensions and theoretical physics, our source text demands that we start right here on Earth. This is our absolute baseline. As the opening line directly states, ordinary probability laws have already held up under extremely rigorous experimentation. Think about what that actually means in everyday practice. Every time you drop an object, every chemical reaction, every highly sensitive measurement ever taken in a lab, they all obey a strict, unwavering set of probabilistic rules. It's a hard fact, backed by literally the most rigorous experiments humanity has ever pulled off. Because of this undeniable track record, the text draws its first major logical conclusion. We fully expect future experiments to keep confirming them. The rules of our universe aren't just going to suddenly change tomorrow, right? That rock-solid foundation is the launchpad for the rest of this entire theory. Moving on to Section 2, the cosmic if, the many worlds interpretation. Okay, so we know the laws of probability hold up perfectly here, but now the text asks us to zoom out from the strict confines of our earthly labs and look at the vast conceptual setting of the multiverse. To really get this argument, we need to quickly define the many worlds interpretation. This is the theoretical framework where reality doesn't just have one single outcome. Instead, it distributes and actively branches into multiple parallel possibilities. Imagine that every single time a probabilistic event happens, like that simple coin flip we just talked about, reality actually splits. You get one branch where the coin lands heads and a completely separate parallel branch where it lands tails. Our source material hinges entirely on this idea of branching realities. Without grasping this continuous splitting of existence, the rest of the puzzle just kind of falls apart. And that brings us to the crucial pivot point. I actually want to pause for a second right here, because this exact quote from the text is just everything. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, that if right there, that acts as the central logical hinge of the whole argument. The text is essentially saying, okay, let's assume for a second that this framework of infinite branching realities is completely true. Let's treat it as a geometric proof of our reality. If every single possible outcome happens somewhere out there in the void, how does that interact with those rock-solid probability laws we just established? Like, how does strict order and endless infinity actually coexist? Which brings us to Section 3, the math of the multiverse. Calculating total measure. So if reality is constantly branching into unending versions of itself, how does all of that existence get organized? How does a seemingly infinite structure manage to distribute its mathematical weight? Well, the source uses a very specific conceptual term to explain this: the total measure. It states explicitly that if the many worlds interpretation is correct, most of the total measure must be concentrated in branches where those same probability laws hold. Now, think of the total measure as basically the statistical bulk of reality. Notice that massive dominant slice taking up almost everything? The vast, overwhelming majority of these branching realities are totally normal. They're branches where ordinary probability laws behave exactly as we expect. Sure, there's that tiny sliver over there, those wildly atypical branches where things go completely off the rails, where probability entirely breaks down. But the statistical weight, the immense concentration of reality, is heavily, heavily stacked in favor of the boring, reliable laws of physics. And finally, Section 4, the personal conclusion, our typical branch.
We've mapped out the mathematical weight of all those cosmic branches. So let's bring it all the way back down to your personal everyday existence. On side A, we have a branch where laws hold. On side B, a wildly atypical branch. The final sentence of our source text drives this conclusion home with perfect clarity. That means we should expect to find ourselves in a branch like that, not in some wildly atypical one. It's ultimately just a simple numbers game, right? Because the absolute vast majority of the multiverse's total measure is so overwhelmingly concentrated in normal branches, the odds dictate that any conscious observer, like you or me, will almost certainly find themselves living in one of those normal branches. Our highly predictable reality isn't some weird cosmic fluke at all. It's a strict statistical necessity, driven entirely by where the bulk of the multiverse happens to be concentrated. We experience stable probability every single day simply because stable probability makes up the overwhelming majority of everything that exists.
We've proven, using the source's exact logical framework, exactly why our universe is so reliably normal. We are statistically bound to live inside the typical branches. But hey, remember that tiny, almost invisible sliver from earlier? The radically different, wildly atypical branches absolutely still exist within this many worlds framework. Which leaves us with this incredibly profound question. If we're safely tucked away here in the reliable typical branch, who is out there experiencing the wildly atypical ones? Somewhere in that tiny statistical sliver, gravity just might shut off on a Tuesday. It's a fascinating consequence of the dense text we explored today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the reality around you.